All right, gang, welcome back to the big board. Here we are. I think, is this my first video for the new year? I think it is. How about that? Well, Happy New Year, everybody. It's it's cold where I am. It is cold for Texas anyway. It got down to 14 or 15 overnight. It's now a balmy 28, and schools are closed, roads are closed, people are home from work. It's funny. In the meantime, Second Fallujah is on the table, and I realize I've got my small camera stand out and we're way too close to the action. But we're going to have a quick chat about the game so far. I would say, generally speaking, I am thoroughly enjoying it, and it is something that I think Nate Rogers from Gibby Gamer and Mo had discussed. They both played this game, I believe. They thought it was deserving of a boxed edition, and I think I think that would be interesting. It would be interesting to see this game just sort of spruced up a little bit from the sort of magazine format. This comes in Paper Wars issue 103 if you're looking for it. I think it's on sale right now. Might be $30, $32, $34, $35, something like that. Regular retail is like $47 plus shipping. And you know, Paper Wars war games have been hit or miss for me. I've had some good ones, and I've had some real terrible ones, and I think you all know the designer that I most dislike that releases games for them. And I've also played some that have been remakes or reboots, and they've left me wanting because they are literally straight remakes, including the errors and no fixes for errata and no upgrades to maps or anything like that. This, however, as far as I know, is a brand new game. And now I'm going to butcher Steve's name here. I'm going to look it up here to try and get it right. Steve Lasecki, or Lasecki, and the squeaky voice at the end there, game designer. Now, he's done a number of games in the past. Some I've liked, some I have not been as thrilled with. But this really is a pretty interesting topic. And it's a very interesting topic, and it's also a pretty interesting game. The magazine, I'm going to try and lift the camera up here for a second. The magazine comes with a bunch of information about first Fallujah and then second Fallujah and what went on and casualty rates and stuff like that. Pretty good stuff. The game, however, let's focus on the game. Now, I'm not a review, not first impressions. I'm now not doing first impressions anymore because it seems like every other son of a gun is doing, my first impressions. So we're just going to have a look at the game at the point at which we are playing, which is the top of turn 10. Top of turn 10, really, Kevin? The top of November 10, top of turn 3. Now, there's some interesting stuff that goes on. I really need to put this camera up a little higher. There we go. There's some interesting stuff that goes on with the rules. First of all, there's a stacking limit for both sides of about 8 counters per area, if I remember correctly. And there's a specific rule for the insurgents where they can only have so many Fedayeen and cadre units in a area as well, and I think that's 5 off the top of my head. And then there's militia or whatever. So with 3 different types of combat units for the insurgents, we have some interesting choices to make about how you use them and how they and what they're capable of. They're all capable of different things. So in the very first instance, the militia, which are, cheap recruits that wave a gun around and, the classic guys you would see lean around the corner or hold a gun up over a fence or a wall and fire blindly, those guys, they die very quickly. 0 defense factor, 0 attack factor, 3 movement points. Which means if there's enemy units in here, for instance, in this zone, then they don't even have enough movement points to move in to attack. So the insurgents are typically going to be restricted to a defensive action or a reaction. So if this area was blank and there was nothing in here, and an allied unit moved in or coalition unit moved in, and they're looking to either do recon or they're looking to take control of the area, there's an opportunity for one other zone, a unit in a zone, that's not spent, being flipped over makes you spent, to react. And that reaction could be anything from putting a unit here, putting a unit in the actual zone, and I believe there might also be a retreat reaction. I forget right now. It's not handy to the top of my head. Oh, here we go. Yeah, retreat. Dig in, retreat, and organize the resistance are the three things, if I remember correctly. Right, so just looking down at my notes. So we've got that, right? So that's interesting for these guys. These guys are basically meat puppets. You'll use them as the insurgent player to absorb losses and then try and preserve your Fedayeen because they're non-replaceable. And they also, as you can see, with 3 movement points, but a 3 factor for attack defense, are stronger and more valuable because they're non-replaceable. But you still really can't run in and attack, right? You can certainly move into empty areas or areas that are contested. I think that has a slightly cheaper cost. I think it's 4 movement points to move into an enemy controlled area, one that you probably want to attack into, and then I think 2 or 3 movement points to move into one that's contested where there's some of your other guys there, right? So you've got those. Then you've got cadres. Well, cadres are used to recruit. So one of the things you can do when it's your activation is pick an area, pick the cadre or cadres in the area, and add militia units into that zone. Cool. Means I can put more meat bags in, meat puppets in to absorb losses, and I keep my good guys. Now, took me a little bit of figuring out to realize that was the name of the game for the insurgents, so that really drove some gameplay for both sides. The Allies went out of their way to find cadre units or seek out cadre unit zones and attempt to kill them. And as soon as we kind of cottoned on to the importance of them, combat is pretty straightforward mechanic. It's a very high level, highly abstract. You can do a couple of different things. Basically, you can either do an airstrike, arty strike, which has a strength of 8, and boom, it goes in and blows things up. And it's 8 combat factors plus 2d6 versus the defender's number and 2d6. Same goes for combat. Now, I'm not sure with the strike whether you probably use the terrain effect. I'm not sure. Nevertheless, that's a minor detail. It doesn't matter at this level of conversation. Not teaching you how to play the game, just trying to give you a feel for it. But for combat, more importantly, we're going to pick a lead unit. I'm going to take this guy here. He's, let's see who he is. He's the 1-3 Marine Company C. So it's a company-sized unit. He's going to be our lead unit. Actually, probably better if we jumped over here to do it here so that we've got actual combatants to fight against. So just this Company A mechanized unit here is attacking. He's going to have 1 supporting unit. So he's going to get +1 DRM. He's going to get +2 for this tank support. It's got a +2 on it, so it's really easy to work that out. These Amtrak units are sort of medical units, and they're going to reduce your losses if you've got 1 in the area when you're attacking. +1 for good old engineers, +1 for having an Iraqi-Daki soldier follow along and hiding around the corner. And Bob's your uncle, there's your DRMs, +2d6. Defender, he's defending with 3, +1, plus the terrain modifier, which is 2 there. We're going to do a dice off. The differential, if it's greater than the defender's number, we're going to take that many casualty points, step losses. So if it was 1, I would just kill this guy or if it was more, dug-in's going to give special effects and help mitigate some of the losses. But if it was this chap over here, I would flip him over for 1, retreat for 2. So flipping him over spends him, and then retreating gives you another CP that you can consume. But if I needed to do more, then I would have to take more losses from these other chaps, right? And the defender gets to choose how those losses are absorbed. So what's interesting is stacking up a bunch of units in a zone doesn't really help you in terms of, accumulating combat factors and trying to get sort of an odds-based opportunity here. All you're really doing is looking to have enough meat puppets to absorb losses so you don't lose your good guys and force these guys then to go another round, which slows them down, given that they've only got a certain number of turns in the game, which I think is 2, 4, 7 turns. All right, so that big broad brush, that's combat. Now down at the next level of detail, it's I would call it highly abstract, but it's a little tense because you've got to get the right mix of people and keeping stuff together, not allowing insurgents to have reach into zones behind you, because that's going to immediately revert them back into the enemy control. So you've got to sort of keep a line going, and you've got to keep the forces sort of cohesive so that they can have that combined arms effect. So interesting way to sort of represent all that very abstractly. But the problem that the coalition faces is there's this idea of an impulse track, right? And it's like a cat is running around. I'm going to try and let's see if we can just do this fairly quickly. Oh, so before we go any further, also political points. Political points are accrued to the insurgents when we have casualties for the allies. So allied units are never eliminated or lost. They are only accrued, damage, and then replacements are brought in, so they're never really killed off at all. But it's the political will that's affected when we see, we had 10 wounded, 10 casualties, 2 deaths, whatever the case may be. And that accrues points, which then get added to the total victory points for the insurgents. They're the ones that score all the points. How many mosques do they have under their control, and how many areas do they have under their control, basically? All right, so impulse. Here's where the game gets super interesting. You start out on 1 after turn 1. That's where we start. And the insurgents always go first after the first turn. Once they're done, we then flip it over to the Americans, the Allied side, coalition side, and then we complete their actions, and then we move it up to 2. Right. Now, impulses continue. An impulse is activating a zone or activating an entry zone, an area or an entry zone, and executing combat and movement with those things until you're done. There are a couple of things we didn't talk about with combat as well. I'm going to try and cross my fingers and come back to them in a sec. Overruns and overwhelming the enemy. But nevertheless, you execute a zone, and then you hand back the activity to the next chap. And then, so once I'm done, I'm then going to move it up to 2. But here's the trick. The first combat that we have, let's say there was combat in this zone here, and it's the first combat. If I roll dice that are lower than 1, and with 2d6, that's not possible. But if I had 3 and I rolled a 2 for the 2d6 for the chaps, the coalition who are fighting, if I roll a 2, turn's over. You're done. So that puts quite a bit of pressure on the coalition to move pretty smartly and to get stuff done, because all it takes is one bad roll and you're having a bad day, right? All of a sudden you've got all these other units that haven't moved, and life becomes difficult. So there's that. So I like that impulse track because it keeps the pressure and the tension on to move and make progress across the course of the 7 turns. But you've also got to monitor your political backlash. Don't want to lose too many political points, and you don't want to lose, but you don't want to lose the momentum. So you've got that fight going on with how hard are you going to push your luck? In this zone over here, zone 17 here, This is the second turn that they've been fighting here. They have not been able to knock these guys out, and it's been expensive. 3 casualty points so far there, I think, if I recall correctly, for the political points for the insurgents. So, a couple other things. What was I going to mention? Yeah, the rest of the turn sequence, after you've done with impulses, the activation of zones and stuff, there's then a kind of let's call it a free move phase, where all the units that are not engaged are able to move one zone into what's basically a free zone or an empty zone or a controlled zone. You can't move into contested zones, but you're allowed to move units around both, and then the allies get to do that. Then is there an infiltration phase? Is that before or after? Let me check. Where is it? There's an infiltration phase where if the allies, the coalition chaps, don't, infiltration is after regroup. The infiltration phase allows the insurgents to start recapturing zones if you don't have them all blocked off, right? Or garrisoned, as the case may be. So, for instance, this might be a classic zone here that could be taken, because I've got this unit here. So we would then say, oh, in the right phase, I'm going to I just get to put a militia unit in there. Now I've got to go back and re-clear that zone. So we don't want that to happen at the top of the turn. What happened there? Why didn't that have one? We might have to look at that. I might have to double check that I made the right decision there and didn't miss that. I may have missed that. So we might have to put a chappie there. All right, so that's good to catch. And let's see what else. So then after that, then everyone gets flipped back over from their spent side to their fresh side, and we're on to the next turn. And Bob's your uncle. And at the end of the scenario, you tally up your zones controlled, which for all those guys who were there or were involved or more fully aware of Second Fallujah, this road. Basically, you've got to have control. You get VPs for all the zones that are attached or adjacent to that area. Then the Jolan Heights, and where is it? It's over here somewhere. Yeah, these zones here accrue VPs as well, and then obviously the mosque zones, etc., etc. So, pretty interesting stuff. Enough to think about, good narrative, didn't quite get so good theme, but not as powerful a theme perhaps as Phantom Fury, but nevertheless compelling. And I think, $46 for a magazine game, it kind of is what it is now. It's the new norm. I was fortunate enough that Gimpy Gamer sent this to me for free. We did some games. It wasn't really free. I sent him some games, and he sent me this and some dice, some cool 2d6 dice, whatever they are, these little guys. Look, I think it's a good game. I also would like to see sort of a bump in the quality stakes, thicker paper map, a little less shiny, be nice. It's a few little things. It needs a player aid card that someone actually made. So you go get yourself this when you download it. It's got nearly everything you need except for overruns and overwhelms. And you don't need to know about that. It's a detail you don't necessarily need to know, but it basically allows the coalition to keep moving if they overwhelm the defender by a certain number of factors. I think it's 5. So got all that stuff going on. Very interesting. As I said, thematic, good narrative, pretty good quality units and components. Like the counters are nice and thick. They're all cut right. Very well done. Interesting little system that is not just a cut and paste of your mum's whatever that what's that generic area war game that everyone plays with the cards and stuff. It's not that. So this has been thoughtfully put together to represent what went on in November 2004. So Paper Wars Fallujah, I think it's issue 103. All the best. Hope you enjoyed that little snapshot. There we go. It's a snapshot. Big Bullet Snapshot. That might be the new title for my videos. Let's see how long that lasts. Later.